We need to discuss electricity. You believe you understand it, correct? After all, it is constantly in use around you. At this very moment, electrons course through whatever device displays these words. Electric power illuminates your surroundings, preserves your food, energizes your gadgets. It is omnipresent. Surely you comprehend it. Very well, describe it to me. What occurs when you connect something to power? Where does that energy truly originate? What constitutes electricity fundamentally? Most responses are nebulous. Energy in motion, electrons traveling. Current through conductors. But these answers trouble me deeply. They explain nothing whatsoever. They merely relabel the enigma. Yes, electrons move. But what compels them? What force drives this movement? And how does this driving force generate illumination, thermal energy, or mechanical motion? The reality is stranger than you imagine. What we label electricity is profoundly, extraordinarily bizarre. Our educational approach completely obscures this strangeness. We present it as ordinary, controllable, benign. Yet when you perceive what is actually occurring, when you glimpse beyond the facade, you discover we're harnessing something absolutely remarkable, something that shatters your assumptions about physical reality. Allow me to demonstrate. Consider this simple experiment. Grab some plastic wrap and tear off a section. Rub it vigorously between your palms as though generating warmth. Now position it near your arm without contact. Notice that your arm hairs respond, rising upward, drawn toward the plastic. You're actually sensing the plastic exerting force on you across empty space. Pause and contemplate this moment. You merely rubbed plastic. Nothing more. No batteries, no conductors, no energy source, simply friction. Yet now this plastic can reach through vacant air and influence your body. How is this possible? In ordinary experience, forces require physical contact. Pushing furniture means touching it. Lifting objects means grasping them. Forces demand connection. Except here is plastic, completely separated from you, pulling your arm hairs through nothingness. Most dismiss this. Static electricity, elementary school science. Insignificant. Insignificant. You're witnessing the force binding every atom composing your body, the force enabling all chemical reactions, the force allowing neural transmission, muscular contraction, visual perception. You're observing one of four fundamental universal forces demonstrating distance action, and you consider it trivial. This represents the problem. Electricity has become so commonplace, we've forgotten its absolute impossibility. Let's examine what transpired. Rubbing that plastic strips electrons from your skin and accumulates them on the plastic surface. Perhaps several trillion excess electrons. And here is the mind, bending reality. Those surplus electrons violently repel each other. They push apart with incomprehensibly massive force. Let me attempt explanation. Position two electrons 1 centimeter apart. The electromagnetic force between them exceeds gravitational force by approximately 10 to the 42nd power, 10 with 42 zeros following. Electromagnetic force so vastly overpowers gravity that gravity becomes essentially non-existent. For electrons, gravity is irrelevant. Meaningless. Electromagnetic forces constitute everything. So the question emerges. If these forces possess such monstrous strength, why doesn't matter spontaneously disintegrate? Why doesn't everything explode? The answer seems almost mystical. Cancellation. Consider atomic structure. Centrally positioned protons carry positive charge. Surrounding electrons carry negative charge. Positive and negative, plus and minus. These charges obey one fundamental rule. Similar charges repel, opposite charges attract. Forces are precisely equal in magnitude. Repulsive push equals attractive pull. In ordinary matter, you find intimate mixing of positive and negative charges, protons and electrons packed as tightly as physics permits. Every positive charge surrounded by negatives, every negative surrounded by positives. Perfect balance. The colossal repulsive forces cancel against equally colossal attractive forces. Everything remains neutral. The forces persist. Those tremendous electromagnetic forces continue acting, but they're balanced so exquisitely that net effect becomes zero. And because underlying forces are so enormous, even microscopic imbalances create perceptible effects. Rubbing that plastic wrap displaces perhaps 1 electron per trillion, essentially negligible, yet sufficient to raise your arm hairs. Because when fundamental forces are that massive, even smallest excess produces noticeable results. This transforms your understanding of matter completely. Pick up any object, hold it. What sensation do you experience? You think you're feeling solid substance, physical material. Incorrect. You're experiencing electromagnetic repulsion. Electrons in your hand repelling electrons in the object with tremendous force. Your inability to push through objects results from electromagnetic forces being so powerful that electrons refuse overlapping. Your hand never truly contacts the object. Not really, always. A microscopic gap exists between your atoms and the object's atoms. You're not experiencing contact. You're experiencing electromagnetic force pushing back. And here is what should fundamentally restructure your worldview. Every force you've ever experienced is electromagnetic. Every push, pull, sensation of touch, pressure, or resistance, all electromagnetic repulsion and attraction, acting across distance. You have never actually touched anything throughout your existence. Every perceived touch is electrons repelling electrons through empty space. The identical force demonstrated with plastic wrap, just acting at smaller distances where forces become enormous. Now consider wires. Conductors stretch throughout your dwelling. One end connects to outlets, the other end connects to lamps. You activate the switch. The lamp illuminates instantly. What occurred? Standard explanation suggests electricity flows like liquid. Electrons enter one wire end, travel its length, emerge at the opposite end. This explanation is fundamentally wrong. Electrons in conductors move incredibly slowly, approximately 1 millimeter per second. At that velocity, electrons would require nearly 30 minutes crossing your house. Yet lamps illuminate instantly. So what is actually happening? Here is the crucial insight. The wire already contains electrons. Copper possesses abundant free electrons, ready for movement. Closing the switch creates voltage difference. That voltage pushes electrons at one wire end. But because electrons repel each other across distances, that push immediately affects subsequent electrons, which push the next ones, which push the next ones, like people standing shoulder to shoulder in line. Pushing the first person makes the last person feel it almost immediately. Not because the first person walked the line's length, but because the push transmitted through the crowd. The push travels through wire at nearly light speed. Not because individual electrons move rapidly, but because electromagnetic force acts instantaneously across distance. That is what makes electricity useful. You can push here, and something responds there, almost instantly across vast distances. But where does the push originate? Let's trace backward. Your lamp connects to outlets. Outlets connect to wall wiring. Those connect to power lines, which connect to power plants, perhaps miles distant, perhaps hundreds of miles away. And at that power plant, something rotates. A massive turbine weighing tons, spinning at thousands of revolutions per minute. That spinning motion, occurring miles away, powers your lamp. How is this possible? The connection between that spinning turbine and your lamp is magnetism. Electricity and magnetism are identical. They're not separate phenomena. They're two aspects of one unified force. The electromagnetic force. Moving electric charges generate magnetic fields. Changing magnetic fields generate electric currents. They're inseparable. Here is generator operation. You spin copper wire inside magnetic fields. The magnetic field pushes electrons in the copper. Electrons resist movement, but the field persists. You force electron flow. That is electric current. That is everything. Motion plus magnets plus copper equals electricity. Now reverse it. Push electricity through copper wire inside magnetic fields. The field pushes moving electrons. The wire moves. That is a motor. Identical phenomenon, simply reversed. Generators convert motion into electricity. Motors convert electricity into motion. And this works because electricity and magnetism are unified. They're aspects of the same underlying force. This should seem impossible. You're claiming I can move metal in one location, and other metal moves in another location, with nothing physically connecting them, except thin copper wire. Correct. You're claiming that spinning a magnet near copper generates a push that travels through wires and makes other copper move. Correct. And we utilize this every single second of every day. Every motor, every generator, every power grid on Earth operates on this principle. Water falls at a dam, turbines spin. Copper moves through magnetic fields. Electrons get pushed. The push travels through hundreds of miles of wire at nearly light speed. It reaches your dwelling, makes electrons move through a motor. Your fan activates. Water falling in one place makes a motor spin in another place. Miles away, connected by nothing but thin metal wire. That is insane. You don't even require permanent magnets for this to function. Take a copper wire coil, run electricity through it. The moving electrons create a magnetic field. Now move that coil near another copper coil. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons in the second coil. Current flows despite no physical connection. That is a transformer. That is how the power grid functions. Just copper, just motion. That is all you need. Metal communicating with metal across empty space using electromagnetic fields. Now here is what should completely transform how you perceive reality. I stated earlier that all forces you feel are electromagnetic, all the pushing and pulling, all the touching and pressing. But consider what that means. The normal forces, the mechanical forces you experience daily, those are consequences of the electromagnetic force. The electromagnetic force is the fundamental reality. Everything else derives from it. When you push a door, you're creating electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your hand and electrons in the door. When you walk on floors, you're being held up by electromagnetic repulsion between electrons in your feet and electrons in the floor. When light hits your eyes, you're detecting oscillating electromagnetic fields, causing electrons in your retina to move. It is all electromagnetic chemistry, electromagnetic forces between electrons in different atoms. Heat atoms vibrating because electromagnetic forces hold them in place. Biology, that is chemistry, which is electromagnetic. Your entire sensory experience of reality is electromagnetic interactions. And here is the deepest thing. You cannot explain the electromagnetic force in terms of anything simpler. You cannot say it is like a spring or it is like a rope, because springs and ropes are made of electromagnetic forces. The electromagnetic force is fundamental. It is one of the four basic forces of nature. You must accept it as a brute fact about reality, and then everything else gets explained in terms of it. That is uncomfortable, because the electromagnetic force acts at a distance, and that violates your intuitions. You've evolved to understand contact forces, but contact is an illusion. There is no contact. There is only electromagnetic forces acting across tiny distances. To understand electricity, to genuinely understand it, you must rebuild your intuition from the ground up. You must accept that the universe is made of fields that permeate all of space, that charged particles push and pull on each other across those fields. That action at a distance is the rule, not the exception. When you flip a light switch, here is the actual story. You close a circuit. Electrons throughout the entire circuit start moving slowly, about a millimeter per second. At the power plant, a turbine spins. Magnets rotate near copper coils. The changing magnetic field pushes electrons. Those electrons push on the next electrons. The push propagates at nearly light speed through hundreds of miles of wire. The push reaches your dwelling. Electrons flow through the thin filament. The filament resists. It is difficult for electrons to squeeze through. That resistance generates heat. The filament gets hot enough to glow white. Electromagnetic waves radiate outward. Some of those waves hit your eyes. The oscillating electromagnetic fields cause electrons in your retina to move. Those moving electrons trigger chemical reactions. Signals travel through your neurons to your brain, and you perceive light. Every step is electromagnetic. The turbine spinning is electromagnetic forces. The signal traveling is electromagnetic repulsion. The resistance is electromagnetic forces. The light is electromagnetic waves. Your vision is electromagnetic. Think about how extraordinary this is. 2 centuries ago, none of this existed. Then we discovered these forces. We figured out how to manipulate them. We built machines that could generate electricity, transmit it across vast distances, and use it to do useful work. And in doing so, we completely transformed human civilization. Electricity gave us instant communication. Telegraph, telephone, radio, television, internet, all electromagnetic. It gave us artificial light, cities that never sleep. It gave us motors, machines that can do work without human or animal muscle. It gave us computation, billions of tiny switches manipulating electromagnetic forces to process information. Everything, every single aspect of modern life runs on electricity. And it is all based on this one insight, that there is a fundamental force that acts across distances. And if you learn to manipulate that force, you can do things that would seem like magic to anyone from 2 centuries ago. So what is electricity really? Electricity isn't a thing. It is not a substance or a fluid. Electricity is what we call it when we manipulate the electromagnetic force to do useful work. But more fundamentally, electricity is proof that the world is not what it seems. The world seems mechanical, solid objects pushing against each other through direct contact. But that is an illusion. The real world is made of fields and forces acting at a distance. Particles pushing and pulling on each other through empty space. When you see plastic attract paper, you're seeing the fundamental force that makes chemistry possible. When you turn on a light, you're commanding electromagnetic fields that permeate all of space. When you understand that, when you really understand what is happening, everything changes. You realize the world is electric, that forces act at a distance, that solid matter is just a carefully balanced dance of repulsion and attraction. And you realize that humans figured this out. We discovered these forces. We learned to manipulate them. We built a civilization on top of them. That is one of the greatest triumphs of human intelligence. So next time you flip a switch, remember, you're not just turning on a light. You're manipulating fundamental forces. You're making electrons push each other across entire cities. You're converting motion to electromagnetic fields. And back to motion. You're wielding power over nature itself. And that is what electricity really is. Not a utility, not a convenience, a window into the fundamental nature of reality and proof that humans can understand and manipulate that reality. That is the real story of electricity. Not comfort, not familiarity, truth.